Okay, it's 5 o'clock. It is August 15th. We will start the Energy, Environment, and Land Use Committee meeting. I don't see anybody for courtesy of the floor. Oh, you do? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's so important that this committee continues to meet and lead, and I saw your agenda and it inspired me to come and be here with you tonight. Climate change is real. I know weather is not climate, but our extreme weather this summer has caused us all to reevaluate the anthropomorphic causes of climate change. It is man-made, and often we're lectured by the deniers and those who seek to cause us not to act, though there's nothing we can do. Unless India and China stop burning coal, we won't be able to cool the planet. There's truth to that. But I have always felt, since I've been county executive, that we can do what we can do in our own little part of the world. So I thought tonight it would be important to come here and take some time to talk about what we've been doing with our respect to our future being green in Northampton County since I've been county executive. Some of the things we've done with respect to the preservation of environmentally sensitive and natural areas. We have invested $9 million with a $13 million local match to preserve 3,599 acres of open space and environmentally sensitive land. With our Livable Landscapes grants, we have granted $11,744,162, matched locally by $23,278,205 for a total of 139 grants awarded. This includes municipal parks, ecological restoration, trail parks, park, recreation, and open space plans. For municipal parks, we have awarded $11,744,162 to get people outdoors breathing fresh air. We, with respect to environmentally sensitive and natural areas, have invested $4,642,862, a local match of $1 million for 622 acres preserved, including 379.67 acres added to Northampton County parks, preserves, and trails. Livable Landscapes grants, $3,346,295, with a $6,608,000 local match for 46 projects, including municipal parks, ecological restoration, and trails. With respect to farmland preservation, one of the most important parts of our Future Green initiative, 256 farms have been preserved in Northampton County, totaling 19,320.61 acres. We currently have 22 easements in progress, totaling another 1,000 acres. And for 2024, we have 17 qualified applications consisting of 899.31 acres. So you can see we're doing a lot in terms of land preservation here in Northampton County. But we've also done a lot and are attempting to do much with respect to renewable energy. For example, when we built our new forensic center, we put solar panels on it. And now most of the energy used at the forensic center is created by the sun. We're very proud of that. Additionally, we've been working with the New England Hydrochemical Corporation to bring small-scale hydroelectric power back to the Lehigh River, and we're still working on that project with them. And in exciting news, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has now become interested in bringing low-scale hydroelectric power back to the Lehigh, and this project is closer than ever to being realized. Additionally, with respect to the generation of naturally occurring sources for electricity, if and when we build the new parking garage, we will cover the top roof with solar panels. We believe we will be able to generate enough electricity to run most of this campus when we do that. And finally, with respect to one of your agenda items, which caused me to come here forward tonight, we anticipate wiring the new garage for 40 electric charging stations so that someday, if some future executive and council determine it's time to electrify our fleet, we'll actually be able to charge them. So we are moving forward into the future, doing our little part here in Northampton County, not only to preserve our open and green spaces, but to begin to bring renewable energy sources to Northampton County and to expand that effort. So thank you very much for letting me speak, ma'am.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, next up on the agenda, Megan McBride is going to give a presentation from the Nature Nurture Center regarding regenerative agriculture.
Thanks, Kelly, and thanks for having me here tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity. Some of you may know me from when I worked as Easton Market District Director in the city of Easton. That's where I was for the past 18 years, and had the opportunity there to basically work on the revitalization of Easton through food. So it's really enjoyable now to be able to dive into kind of a broader perspective of food and farming throughout the greater Lehigh Valley. I did also want to just thank County Council and Northampton County for all their support of Buy Fresh, Buy Local over the past couple of years. You've been very supportive in terms of the hotel tax grants, which we've used that money for agritourism initiatives, so thank you very much for that. And with that, I'm going to get started. So we're going to talk about dirt tonight. Probably weren't expecting that, but we're going to talk a lot about dirt. And more specifically, soil and what the difference is. I'm sure everybody is familiar or remembers learning about the Dust Bowl when they were in school. And you know, this was the largest man-made disaster that our country ever experienced. And during that time, over 2 million acres of cropland was destroyed basically through over-tillage, over-tilling the soil. And it was at that time that President Roosevelt developed the Soil Conservation Service. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But, you know, this quote is very telling, you know, going along with nature, with what we've been doing in the past, instead of trying to buck nature. So healthy soil absorbs water and carbon dioxide. But when we destroy that soil, like you see on the picture on the right there, it releases the water and the carbon dioxide into the environment. It dries out the soil turns to dust, hence the Dust Bowl, and this process is called desertification. And unfortunately, desertification is occurring all across our country and, you know, more so all across our globe right now. And according to the United Nations, we have about 60 harvests left in us. So we need to solve this problem. And this isn't going to be a downer presentation by any means. I'm here to tell you how we can actually solve this problem. But before I do that, I just want to quickly touch on some climate change and its impact on the Lehigh Valley specifically. These notes are from the 2024 Lehigh Valley Hazard Mitigation Plan, which is an amazing document chock full of a ton of information. I never really had the opportunity to dive into that before. Obviously, no, droughts are a concern. We're seeing longer periods of dry weather followed by interspersing of really, really heavy rains. And it's obviously very difficult for farmers and everyone to deal with, of course. But what some people might not realize is the relationship between the soils and the plants and the climate. It's all interconnected. And if you don't have living plants, you're going to have more evaporation. So when you picture back to that, you know, photo of the Dust Bowl and what that looked like, what we want is something called transpiration, where the moisture actually leaves through the plants, and when it does that, it increases humidity, and when it increases humidity, you get more rain. So about 60% of our rainfall comes off the ocean, but the other 40% actually comes from the inland. And if you don't have this plant matter, if you don't have your ground covered with plants, you're actually interrupting that cycle. So that's what we're seeing happening, and we're having these huge vortexes of hot air that are going out, and they're actually pushing the clouds away. They're pushing the rain away, in effect. So the other thing that we're seeing here is obviously flooding. That's, you know, named as the biggest natural hazard in the Lehigh Valley. And I think we all know a lot of that is occurring because of the overdevelopment of land, the warehouses, all the impervious surfaces created by the developments. And then to kind of add to that nightmare situation, you have runoff from farms and other areas, roadways. You have all those contaminants going into our waterways. And it's Obviously concerning that the Lehigh River is now named the 7th most endangered river in the country. But again, we're going to keep it positive, and we're going to talk about ways that we can fix these things. So a huge loss of crops. The dollar amount of that between 2010 and 2023 was $1.3 million as a result of flooding. So definitely something to be paying attention to. So the mitigation report at the end, it's basically recommending 3 main things: looking at efficient water use, sustainable agriculture, and enhancing our water storage capacities. One thing I just want to mention is our parent organization, the Nurture Nature Center. They did a series, it just actually finished up over the last 2 years. It was called Create Resiliency. And Nurture Nature Center created resiliency plans for 6 of the more rural areas in Northampton County. Let's see, Lower Nazareth, Portland Borough, Palmer Township, Bath. There's 6 altogether. I don't have the full list, but in those, they provided reports to them looking at, like, what are your assets? What are your issues that need to be addressed? How can you address them? And they also provided emergency management kits for those municipalities. So what is regenerative agriculture? You hear the term regenerative farming. Regenerative agriculture, the term itself was actually coined by our own Robert Rodale right here in the Lehigh Valley in the 1980s. But what's really interesting is it started hundreds of years ago before that, the actual practice. It wasn't called that, but it's what the Native Americans were doing. It's what most of our ancestors were doing many years ago. So what isn't it? Conventional agriculture typically relies on synthetic fertilizers, pesticides. You have monocrops where you see miles and miles of just one crop, whether it's corn or soy. And you have intensive tillage. And I think we all grew up, thinking that's what farmers do. They till the fields. No. We're learning that is not a good thing. So in contrast, regenerative agriculture emphasizes soil health, and it's about rebuilding the soil. So we've all heard about sustainable agriculture, which is awesome, and growing organically, but this actually takes it a step further, where you're actually growing soil. So when the United Nations talks about us losing, all our soil, this is an answer to actually regrowing the soil. So there's these 5 principles of regenerative agriculture. 2 of the most important are that you want to keep soil covered. Think about those plants and what that does in relation to the atmosphere. You want to minimize soil disruption as much as possible. There's a whole ecosystem going on below that soil if you're managing your farm right, and every time you till, you're disrupting that entire ecosystem. So you want to maintain living roots to keep that ecosystem going and thriving. You also want to look at diversity. When you're driving along the road and you're seeing plants along the roadside or on a mountainside, you see a diverse amount of plants. You don't just see one type of plant. And that's really important to attracting the right kind of pollinators and beneficial insects and everything else, and just creating that ecosystem. And also integrating livestock, despite what some people feel about that. So cover crops are super important. And I'm sure you've driven by fields and you may have seen things like clover or other greens that you knew weren't necessarily cash crops, and wondered why they were there. Cover crops do tremendous work in improving the soil health and supporting the microorganisms in the soil, and they help to retain the water. So they're basically become like this huge sponge. So you're avoiding that runoff when you have floods. And floods don't have to be so catastrophic, and you're not having all this runoff from farmland straight into your adjacent roadways. So what is a cover crop? A cover crop is basically, it's a non-cash crop that a farmer is planting after they've harvested their crop. So the end of the summer or the middle of the fall, they're harvesting their corn or what have you, and then they're planting something. It could be anything from rye, or it could be buckwheat, or something called cowpeas, or all different kinds of grasses. And ideally, it's a multitude of those things mixed together. Makes an even healthier situation. And then come spring, they're actually crimping that down, rolling that down, and they're going to be planting directly into that cover crop, which essentially becomes mulch, like you see in the picture here. So it's helping with the soil erosion and runoff. It's actually suppressing weeds, so it's reducing the need for herbicides. It's attracting all kinds of pollinators and bugs. Farmers that do this start seeing earthworms returning to their soil. I mean, when I was a kid, if you dug up soil, you found a lot of earthworms. They found in the past, 50 years or so, earthworms have essentially disappeared from our farmland because of the way we've managed the soil. There's also huge economic benefits to it. Farmers are seeing increase in their yield, and of course they're having reduced costs because they're not spending the same amount of money on fertilizers and herbicides, and then they don't have those things, the potential for those things to be running into the waterways and into the food, of course. But the number one thing, which is here in yellow, is that cover crops can help mitigate climate change by removing carbon from the air and storing it in the soil. And that's why keeping that network of roots that are growing below the ground structured, where you're creating kind of this like meshy kind of situation, that's why you want that, because with photosynthesis, the carbon is going into the plants, and it's then going down into the soil and into the root exudates and out into the soil where it is stored, which is like a magical thing. So in conjunction with cover crops is something called no-till, which is doing many of the same things as the cover crops. The farmers are not actually tilling the land. They're making just shallow ways, or they're using seed drills to put the seeds in right amongst the cover crops. And there's huge benefits to this in terms of fuel costs too. I mean, this is for a 1,000-acre farm. You could save about $8,500 worth of diesel fuel a year. Also, tremendous reduction in labor costs because you're not passing over the field multiple times doing multiple things. So the really cool thing is that Rodale actually developed something that's used throughout the world, and it's this roller crimper. I never thought I would be excited about farm equipment, but so what this does is it actually, so in the spring, or whenever you're rolling over your cover crops, you're crimping it down, so you have to wait until the cover crop actually flowers, so it's not continuing to grow underneath the ground. It's kind of crushing the stem and it's crushing it down, and then farmers are able to plant directly into that cover crop. But the really cool thing is it has this attachment where it has a seed drill and a seed compartment, and at the same time you're rolling and crimping, it's making holes and it's placing the seed at the same time. So a pretty neat design. The other thing is integrating livestock. So a lot of people, there's certainly a lot of information out there that the methane gas released by animals is contributing to greenhouse gases and to climate change. The beautiful thing is if you're managing your livestock properly and you're rotating them on your crops and you're able to take advantage of using those cover crops, so it's just the circle of life. So the cow's urine and manure is going into the cover crops. They're tamping it down with their feet. It's going back into the soil. It's feeding the soil. And I've talked to some farmers that have these amazing systems where they have a large amount of cattle in small areas, and they're going from paddock to paddock, and they just have timed release gates that are solar powered. They open up, so they're on one paddock for a certain amount of time, and then they go to the next. And he said that it's just added so much health to his farm in terms of also bringing back, a lot of insects and organisms that he has not seen there in a long time. And the best thing about it is that he stopped doing all worming of his animals, not vaccinating, not having to use the same type of artificial means. So the proof is in the soil. You want your soil to look like chocolate cake. And this is a farm that just started with regenerative agriculture. In 2019, they had what looks like very just dry dirt. It's pretty much dead. 2021, a few short years later, it's looking like chocolate cake because it is enriched with everything that is below the surface. So regenerative agriculture also grows more food per acre, and it's scalable to any size system. You could do it in your backyard, or you can do it in thousands of acres on farmland. And for every 1% increase in organic matter that we see out there in our communities, an acre of soil draws down 10 more tons of carbon. So if a farmer's going to leave their land completely bare for the entire fall, winter, spring, you know, they're missing out on the opportunity, and so is our community missing out. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I've certainly driven by plenty of farms where all you see is dirt, you know, in the winter months. You're not seeing any green surface there. So this is a big question. Can regenerative agriculture reverse global warming? In 2015, at the Paris Climate Summit, the French Minister of Agriculture, you know, put out this theory that yes, it could. And you know, many countries signed on a commitment and belief of this system. And the really most amazing part about this is it also addresses our legacy load of carbon, because the solar-powered car, or the electric cars and solar energy and all those things are amazing because they're decreasing emissions, but what they're not addressing is all the carbon that's been sitting here since the 1700s with the Industrial Revolution. So the amazing thing about this is that it actually gives us hope. And I think that we all have been feeling a lot of hopelessness, and certainly our younger generation is feeling that. But now we can say, within 20 years of actively using regenerative agriculture throughout the world, we can look at cooling down the earth, which is an amazing statement. We can fix a lot of our climate issues if we just bring that CO2 down into the living plants. And the amazing part about the soil is that it can hold more carbon than the atmosphere and the plants combined. It has this ability, but only if you maintain that soil structure. So, you know, I think a lot of people, you know, they hear these terms and they think, oh, this is like some newfangled thing, and, you know, young farmers are doing this. And that's not the case at all. So this is a book I would highly recommend. It's called Dirt to Soil, and it's written by this guy, Gabe Brown, from South Dakota. And he was a purely conventional farmer. He bought his farmland from his father in 1991, there was a lot of hailstorms. He had all kinds of weather-related issues. His farm was suffering. He was getting deeper and deeper into debt. And he started trying some of these things, partially just out of desperation because he didn't have money to purchase fertilizers and insecticides and things. And by the time, you know, about 5 years later, he was seeing a significant impact in what he had done. One of the things is the soil infiltration rate, or the rain infiltration rate. So it's not really about how much rain you get. People say, oh yeah, we got to get enough rain. It's really about how much rain can infiltrate your soil. And if you properly manage your soil, you're going to make a big difference. So when he started out, I actually forgot my notes, so I don't have this number exactly right, but he went from about getting like a ½ inch of rain being able to absorb into his soil in an hour to 6 inches of rain in the span of an hour, which can make a huge difference, going back to those images thinking about flooding and all of that. There's not time to do it, but I have a video here. I'd also suggest looking at it. It's the Myers Family Farm in Center County, Pennsylvania. They won the Leopold Conservation Award this year. And again, this is like a really old school farm. This guy's in his 70s, his dad is in his 90s, and they completely transformed their farm using these kinds of methods. And they're finding that, you know, it's more profitable. They have something then to pass on to their children. And it's just putting new hope into the minds of farmers. So in Northampton County, surely there's more farms that are practicing these regenerative ideas, but these are just some that I'm familiar with through my work with Buy Fresh, Buy Local and Easton Farmers Market. Harvest Home Meats has received a litany of conservation awards. Hunter Hill CSA, right in Forks Township in Easton, they're doing amazing things with cover crops and no-till. Twin Maple Farms, which you might know from Bath, they're known for their potatoes in the Lehigh Valley. This was just a really interesting conversation with them because they've been doing cover crops for the last 3 years with clover, and they've said they've seen a significant improvement in their soil health. And in kind of looking back in the notes from their great-grandfather, they saw that that's exactly what he was doing back in the 1900s. So this isn't something new. It's just something that went by the wayside. You know, after the Dust Bowl and after World War II, when it became chemicals and science were the key to farming, all of this just went out the door. And we've sadly realized that that is not the way to go. There's also, you know, farms in the Northampton County that are doing a lot with solar power. Syandala Farm powers their entire farm with solar panels that they got through a grant through the USDA. And just some other initiatives that are going on in Northampton County, riparian buffers. So this was a neat project. It was actually a partnership with Monocacy Farm Project and some water stewardship programs in the Lehigh Valley. And they were addressing some concerns. One was at Misty Valley Farm, who has a creek that runs right through their farmland. And so they created a riparian buffer with native plants and trees in order to make that buffer between the farmland and the creek to avoid sediment runoff and any kind of chemical runoff. And also at Hockendaqua Park and Playground, there was one made between the creek and the parking areas. And the neat thing about this too is that they're finding with these riparian buffers, they're encouraging the planting of nut trees and fruit trees, and in this case they did a variety of pussy willow. So these were things that farmers can actually create a profit from, so they can sell these products. So it's not just creating this environmental situation, but it's also, you know, creating a profit for them. So how do we engage a new generation in farming? There's, you know, obviously a lot of barriers to farming. You know, farmland is very expensive. I think that's probably the number one. It's very difficult for people to purchase their own land. I know a lot of our farmers at the Easton Farmers Market rent land, which really is, you know, makes it difficult to make a profit when you're renting land. You know, mentorship can be a big issue, but I will say in the Lehigh Valley, we're very fortunate to have some really great programs to support new farmers. I erred here not putting PASA Sustainable Agriculture on here, and they're a huge resource. But they do, and Rodale, they both offer farmer training for people that have, you know, little to no farming experience, everything from the science to the finance to the production end of it. Rodale is actually having a big whole week-long seminar in September just on soil health. And the interesting thing is it's aimed at healthcare professionals. So it's making the correlation directly between soil health and human health. Russell Redding, the Secretary of Agriculture, was just around recently talking about DCED has beginning farmer tax credit program, which is really great. So there's definitely some good options. The Seed Farm is an incubator farm in Emmaus where someone can learn how to farm and actually start their own farm there. And farmers there take that product and they sell it at farmers markets or where have you. You know, some of them sell to retailers and restaurants. And there is a lot of state assistance right now, thanks to Governor Shapiro just signing the new budget. There's $10 million that's allocated for agriculture innovation programs, and I believe a lot of that will apply to regenerative agriculture. I couldn't find any specifics yet of what that money is being approved for, but that's exciting. This picture here is actually a picture of a farm in Pennsylvania that put in a biodigester, which converts their manure and their food waste directly into energy to power their farm, which is really cool. The Farm Bill, the federal Farm Bill, is another whole story. That's actually due to end in September 30th. It ended 6 months ago, and then Congress kept it going somehow for another couple of months, hoping that they could come to some kind of a decision. So that is not yet. And from what I understand, there's a lot of back and forth tied up in the amount of money that's, I think it's $142 billion that's going for subsidies for corn and soy and commodity crops. And for things like disasters and all that, very little of that ever makes its way to small farms, I will note. But at the same time, there's some talk about cutting some of these conservation programs and also some of the food nutrition programs like SNAP. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of debate around that. So hopefully get their acts together. And if you remember way back in the beginning, we talked about Roosevelt Soil Conservation Service. That was eventually made part of the NRCS, which is a really great organization. I would say probably most of our farmers in this area use it for soil testing and the like. And they have a lot of funding and educational programs and are very behind regenerative agriculture. So farmland preservation, I just want to thank all of you guys in Northampton County because I think you're doing an amazing job moving forward with this. I saw there was 2 more farms just added this week, so that was really nice to see. But I have this thought that you could take this even a step further, and with your farmland preservation, if you could also somehow require that these become regenerative farms, you're not just preserving that land, but you're actually preserving the soil and contributing to the overall health of the community and, essentially the world. So I don't know. I've did a little research on what's out there in terms of that and didn't see too much, but I'm hoping that will be something that will be brought into the conversation in the next couple of years. But again, I thank you. I did want to let you know that Buy Fresh, Buy Local, back in 2015, we did a local food economy report. It's an assessment and report of the state of local food in the whole Lehigh Valley. And we're in the process of redoing that. Obviously, there's a lot happened between then and now. So we're hoping to have that out probably by next spring is our hope. But we have a lot of great things going on. We're going to be at Second Harvest Food Bank in September with a program connecting farmers with food banks, so giving them another outlet to be able to sell their food into that avenue. And you can check out our website, Buy Local, Greater Lehigh Valley. And yeah, and I gave you guys a resource sheet there. And I don't know were you able to print the ag census thing? Okay. No. It wasn't great anyway. Yeah, there's the most recent information from the Ag Census was from 2022, and it was basically a rundown of the 421 farms in Northampton County. So you can find that online, or Kelly could share it with you, but
That was,
yeah.
Man, do you mind if I go? It was going to be, one of my questions was going to be, when you talked about, I believe this term was desertification?
Yes, yeah.
Are there farms in Northampton County that have gotten to a point due to desertification that regenerative soil would not necessarily be able to happen? It wouldn't be able to occur?
It can always happen.
It can always occur. It can always
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. There's a really great movie I put on your resource sheet. It's called Kiss the Ground. And in that movie, they show really arid areas in Africa and in Asia that were just completely dry to the bone, rock and soil, dirt, and they've completely regenerated. They've completely turned them around.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, and that's the really hopeful thing about it is there's no saying no to it.
When you have the new Buy Fresh, Buy Local report in the spring, can you come back to us? And
Yeah, I would love to.
On that?
Yeah,
I'd love to-
absolutely.
Love to learn more.
Great. We're hoping to get lots of help from Lafayette College and putting that together, so lots of research.
Mr. Prado?
I'm a big fan of research on regenerative farming. I've been looking into it for a while. And then I talked to a lot of farmers, and I have a good friend who has one of the bigger farms in Northampton County. And I always ask him questions, and I kind of wonder how this scales up. Out of all the lists of the regenerative farms that you've worked with, what's the biggest farm on that list?
Probably Twin Maples, and they're not completely. So I would say they're probably like maybe a third regenerative agriculture, and the rest is still conventional.
How many acre farm, do you have any idea?
I don't off the top of my head.
And I guess that'd be,
Yeah.
because I don't think anybody's arguing the benefits of this. I think it's a little bit more technical, and it's harder, these farmers are gonna have a lot of education to be able to have to do this, because it's not as simple as monocrop agriculture or having
Right.
having a dairy farm. You literally have to be well-rounded, and it's a lifestyle. It's not just a job. These people have to learn it, live it, and then carry it on.
Right.
It seems like a lot of the farmers, at least in my area, they're getting older, and there's not a lot of young kids that want to go into being farmers. It's, not only is it hard to get into because it's expensive, but it's
Yeah.
a lot of work. So how do you make it appealing? And then how do you, if your vision, and I think the goal is to make this a larger scale project and see this happening where it could be sustainable for, not just for the fact of saving the climate, but to feed people, because that's generally why we farm. We have to feed 330 million people. Can it be done on this system?
Yeah, it absolutely can. So that book, From Dirt to Soil, Brown's Ranch in North Dakota, I said South Dakota before, that's a huge farm, several thousand acres, and hundreds of thousands of acres. And he's done it completely across the board. And, he had gotten to the point where he didn't think his farm was even anything worth passing on to his son. And it became just the opposite. His son came on, he made sure that his son went away to college first before taking over the farm. And while his son was at college, he was like, "Dad, they're teaching all the wrong principles." And so his son came back and took part in the farm, and they started making it even more biodiverse. They started bringing in more different types of animals and doing more cover crops. Like, their cover crops will consist of like 30 different types of seed in one mixture. And the profitability of this is absolutely amazing. So for scaling up for a larger farm, 100%. I think as far as making it more appealing to young people, I'm hoping that this kind of sense of hope that there's something else in farming, that it's a good thing. Because I think, farming has gotten a bad rap because people saying it does contribute to global warming. And in this case, that's not what's happening. So I think that's making it more hopeful. I know at PASA, they have a huge conference every year that I've attended, and they're saying that their attendees are skewing younger and younger and younger because people are getting excited about farming. It wasn't exciting when it was all just about, applying chemicals, and, there was a misery to it. And I think people are seeing it to have a greater impact on the earth. So yeah, I can definitely get some, and when we redo the report, I can have, there's gonna be a whole big section in there about regenerative agriculture, and we can talk about the scalability. That's a good question.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
All right.
Thank you so much.
I'm gonna
This was
leave some
interesting.
local food guides here and some tote bags because they have the Northampton County logo on them.
Oh, I love that.
I'll leave those if anyone would like those. And thank you so much. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to talk about dirt.
Thank you, and I look forward to you coming back.
Thank you.
Okay, next up on the agenda is the discussion regarding electric vehicle comprehensive plan.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Keegan. Yes, you all have in front of you the electric vehicle readiness plan that was put together by Somerset County, New Jersey, back in September 2018, and in subsequent months and years. It's just a brief overview in terms of what another county, basically right down the road from us, was able to do and initiated in terms of them being proactive when it comes to where the future's going. And as some of us had maybe read earlier this year, that PennDOT put out some information that we saw in Pennsylvania, 45% increase, in electric vehicles. Data that was released by PennDOT back in March showed that more than 63,000 electric vehicles are registered in the state. Hybrid EV number, that is 274,800 statewide. And as a result of course, we all know electric vehicles, it's not just the wave of the future because it's some sort of shiny type of new object. I think a lot of folks are coming around to the fact that, gas-powered vehicles haven't necessarily been the most environmentally friendly, health-friendly over many, many decades. And here in Pennsylvania, we're going to be getting $172 million via the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program over the course of the next 5 years to develop EV corridors across the 1,800 miles of roadways here in the state. So I was hoping to have a discussion within this committee about the prospects of creating here in Northampton County our own electric vehicle comprehensive plan for the future, and whether that deals with some of the goals that were outlined in Somerset County's plan, and specifically looking at how we are going to handle our fleet in the future, how we are going to really embrace the fact that because of our geographic location here in the United States, Northampton County, the I-78 corridor, Route 33, Route 22, it's used by a lot of folks. And for us to be one of the many hubs within the Northeast Corridor for electric vehicle readiness in the future, because it's certainly coming, I think would be something very proactive for this county to begin embarking on. So I wanted to simply have a discussion about it. Again, I'm not saying that we need to do exactly what Somerset County did a few years back, but I think it would be, again, proactive if we started to embark on at least conversations about where this could potentially go in the future, because electric vehicles, electric vehicles are not going away anytime soon, and we're going to need an infrastructure for it, more so than what we have now. So wanted to provide that information to you all. Maybe we could have a discussion about it, whether it's now or whether it's at some other point in the future as well. We're not going to be making any decisions, I don't think, right now, this particular point in time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Gofredo.
Well, I feel like I'm always the contrarian, but I have insight from the other side. We were working with a Ford dealership in the Valley, and when we started working with them, we were going through the process of building them a new dealership, and Ford started electrical vehicle mandates in, I think, 2020 or 2021. So the new dealership had to have 3 superchargers or speed chargers. They each required 600 amps, 3-phase service for each charger. So I don't know if you're familiar with just electrical needs, but, you know, like my house has a 200 amp service for the house. Just these 3 chargers needed 1,800 amps. And the municipality where this dealership was in was a municipality that had their own power company. And the power company said, we simply can't provide that much power for you. It's just not feasible with our power supply. Because we need to remember that the electricity comes from somewhere, and most of the time it's coming from fossil fuel burning power plants. Lo and behold, we've been dealing with this dealership for 3 years now, trying to get this project started. At the last Ford conference that they had down in Philadelphia, Ford nationwide did away with the EV mandates because the dealerships were complaining that they weren't selling these cars as much as they were the traditional cars. They're selling some, but the needs for the electrical, you know, the superchargers were very demanding. And that's just on the charging side. But then there's the, you know, we always talk about tailpipe emissions and the fact that electric cars don't have tailpipe emissions. Can't argue that. But the process of how we make these cars and the battery mining is very dirty and very, you know, if you look into the labor, I don't know if you ever read the book Cobalt Red, but it's about all the cobalt in the world for these cars come from slave mines in Africa. So it's like, I get it. Everybody wants to push this EV vehicle thing, but I'm always hesitant, especially as the government. I like to see where the market goes. I don't think the government should be dictating for the market. I think the market should dictate to us. And I think it's great to talk about, and I think that's why we're talking about it. But just the voice of, you know, being the contrarian on the other side, I think it's early. I don't think it's proven. I think there's some great vehicles out there, and I think they're fun to drive. I just don't know if it's going to scale up. I don't think they're overtaking gasoline cars anytime in the next decade, that's for sure, unless something changes with how we make these cars. And then the fact that once these batteries go, the cars they're not worth the resale. So it's like people are really having a hard time buying the second car because sometimes their cars go out at 75,000 miles and they have nothing they do with them. They have to get rid of them. They have to buy a new car from nothing. So I'm still a skeptic on it. I would love to hear if anybody has, you know, rationale as to why my concerns are, you know, maybe overblown, but I definitely think that there are still kinks to be worked out.
I think with regard to the market, Mr. Gofredo, we've seen 45% increase in electric vehicles.
Yeah,
here
but
in
you said there was
Pennsylvania.
like
That's according-
60,000, right? 60,000 electric vehicles in the state of Pennsylvania?
Yeah, 63.
There's 12 million cars in the state of Pennsylvania.
Right, right.
So
We're still
that's a-
seeing we're still seeing a significant, but it's a 45% increase.
That's how you use stats to like,
Yes.
if you only have
Absolutely.
5,000, now you have 10,000, it's like, well, you just had 200% increase. It's like,
Right.
well, that's still only a fraction.
Right. I completely understand where you're coming from, Mr. Gafredo. My point with bringing this up is to not get to a point where we have 10 million EVs and, oh my gosh, what are we going to be doing here? It's not to implement something quickly. It's not to implement something in a very fast fashion at all with regard to this. It's talking about the future, to be proactive with it, because I believe, based on data and research that I have done as well, that the industry itself is going to continue to grow. It may only grow 20% one year, perhaps 15% another year. Maybe it goes up to 30% subsequent years. There is going to continue to be growth within this industry. My reasoning for bringing this up is just that the county be proactive with regard to this. And again, nothing that we need to decide tonight or even next month or even potentially next year. However, I wanted to bring this up simply because it is a growing industry. It's a growing industry that is not dying anytime soon. So certainly something I would like to talk to you about more in the future, for sure. And I don't know if I'm going to convince you otherwise that this may need to be done in a proactive fashion, but.
Listen, I don't have a dog in the race, you know what I mean? I'm as an observer, you're making, if I'm playing blackjack, you're betting that you're gonna, hit and be all right. I think we're gonna buzz. I think this market, you said it's never gonna stop growing. I think it is gonna stop growing, unfortunately. I don't think that gasoline vehicles are gonna be around 100 years. I think there might be hydrogen vehicles. I have no idea. I just think that we're kind of out of sight, out of mind with electric vehicles. We don't see how they're made, so it doesn't bother us how the batteries get made, and that it's all out of our country. They're all controlled by China, and they're all being made by slave labor, which I think that's a huge moral conflict. And then the fact that you can't resell one if they're not, after 100,000 miles, they're not on the road. And we haven't lived that long in the EV market to see that come to fruition yet. Once that happens, then I think the stock's gonna drop on them. So that's why I'm saying, it's like, yeah, I love talking about stuff. I love outside the box thinking, but I don't like trying to be the trendsetter as a government. I want the market to set the trend, because the market usually, not ideologically captured, it's money driven. And people don't like losing money or wasting money. They like to, spend money wisely. So hopefully the market can tell us what would be the best thing to do. I just wouldn't go dumping millions and millions of dollars into upfitting, Northampton County for electric vehicles, because who knows where we'll be in 20 years.
Part of this comprehensive plan or a readiness plan is also not just us simply making decisions, but bringing more people to the table, bringing businesses, bringing other local municipalities to the table to see what their ideas are as well, how everybody can contribute in the future to this if we do continue to see. And I don't know if we are going to continue to see 45% increases from year to year. I am gonna go with what PennDOT has said here. We're seeing increases. So, they're not millions upon millions of new EVs on our roadways, but the trend is there. I don't have the crystal ball, and I know you don't have a crystal ball either, but I truly believe the market is been pushing us in that direction. Whether roadblocks are going to be in front of us in the future with regard to this entire EV issue, it does remain to be seen. But again, this is just a discussion point that I wanted to bring up during this committee to see what folks' thoughts were and how we may want to potentially proceed in the future. Thanks for your thoughts.
Anybody else? No, I just have to say that Forks Township, there have been developments being made, and the builder has brought to us that, had brought back when I was on the board, that they were going to have in the garage, whatever it is to plug in their cars. They were getting ready for that trend. And I know that in Giant parking lot, there's only one charger, and every time I go, there's a car in there charging. And then I have friends that when they go on long trips, they have to figure out where the charging stations are. because, you know, they're gonna run out of juice, and then they just can't go to a gas station, so that's a problem for them, but, you know, they have to figure that out, and of course, when people stop and they're charging, they spend money, you know what I mean? They go out to eat or whatever, so, I could see doing this and having more people spend money in Northampton, while on their way through.
And again, it's not just do it to do it. It's, again, our small corner of America here in Northampton County is a very important area of this northeast corridor of the United States. It is. I mean, we see what's been happening, of course, with development around our county, around the Lehigh Valley in general. So again, my reasoning for putting this and asking for this to be on the agenda really was just to get a discussion started, because I truly believe that we're going to see more EVs on our roads in the future, and let's plan, let's be proactive about it.
Yeah.
So,
And I like that you brought this to us, because there's no need to reinvent the wheel. You know what I mean? If other places are doing it, then you could take some ideas from it, but
the city of
definite-
Pittsburgh actually has a comprehensive plan as well. I don't want to bombard everybody with a ton of paperwork, but other cities, other counties throughout the United States have embarked on this as well. So it's not anything that's brand new by any stretch of the imagination, so.
Well, I guess we'll keep our eyes on, you know, the sales and percent increase.
Yep.
All right, anybody else? Okay, that's it for the agenda. We'll adjourn.